great to be with you. Thank you for coming today. Let me start out by telling you what I think is the most interesting thing that I have uncovered about negotiating in the 13, 14 years now that I've been writing and talking about it. And that is that when you're negotiating, whether you're buying or selling a car or buying or selling real estate, or maybe you're negotiating a new job and you're negotiating your compensation package, you're doing exactly the same things that the international negotiators are doing. Exactly the same principles that apply whatever level of negotiating. So you're doing exactly the same thing that our UN ambassador does to get sanctions on foreign nations. You're doing exactly the same things that the arms control negotiators do. You're doing exactly the same things that the FBI does when they're involved with hostage situations. It's kind of like golf. There's only one golf swing. You just apply it to the different situations that you find yourself in. That's kind of interesting because what it means is once you get the fundamentals down, which I'll start to teach you today, from then on, every time you turn on the television or open up a newspaper and see one of these heavy negotiations going on, you'll be able to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and it becomes a continuing learning process for you. Let me give you a couple of examples of that, how you can look at international negotiations and apply it to what you do on a day-to-day basis. November 1994, Port-au-Prince, Haiti, we had former President Carter sitting down with General Cedras to negotiate the return of democracy to Haiti. And the phone rang, and it was President Clinton saying, "I have already started the invasion. You have 30 minutes to get out of there." Now, that's extreme time pressure in a negotiation, right? Extreme time pressure. And you all know that under time pressure, people become more flexible. If you're negotiating with someone and they've got to have your goods or services right now, or they need that car you're selling right now, chances are you'll be able to get a better price than if they're just kind of shopping around and looking for a deal. Well, your children know about time pressure, don't they? When do they ask you for something? Just at the last minute, right? Just as you're rushing out or they're rushing out, that's when they know they have the best chance of getting something. My youngest son will sometimes drive me over to Los Angeles Airport. That's about a 45-minute drive. We won't talk about anything of consequence on the way over there until we get curbside. And the SkyCap's got the luggage on the car. I'm about to race off and try and catch this plane when I hear him saying, "Dad, I'm sorry, I forgot I need $50 to fix the muffler on my car." And I say, "John, don't do this to me. I teach this stuff." Now, how come this didn't come up before? And he says, "Well, Dad, I'm sorry, I forgot, but I got a fix-it ticket on the car. I've got to get it done before you get back from your trip. Let me have the money now, and I'll explain it to you when you get back." See, instinctively, they understand that under time pressure, people become more flexible. So in Haiti, we had extreme time pressure on this negotiation. The problem was that President Clinton was putting time pressure on the wrong side. When you have all the power in a negotiation, you don't put time pressure on your own ambassador. It caused him to give away things like agreeing to rent the general's houses and other things that he really didn't have to do. You put time pressure on the other side. Now, here's a key point about negotiating, and it's probably the most important thing you can learn about negotiating. The number one important thing to know. We didn't have the power in Haiti because we had the bigger army. We had the power in Haiti because we had the most options. Options give you power. You see, we didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to invade. We didn't have to do a thing. But we had very effectively limited General Cedras' options to just one or two countries around the world who would even accept him as a refugee. So we had the power not because we had the bigger army, but because we had the most options. If you can convince the other side that you have all kinds of options, and at the same time you can convince them that they have very limited options, you have tremendous power in a negotiation. And you know something? It's not really whether you have the options or not. It's just whether the other side thinks you have the options or not, because in negotiating, everything is perception. If they believe you have the options, that's as good as having them. At the end of World War II, the Japanese surrendered to us because they thought we had an arsenal of atomic bombs with which we could destroy their country. We didn't. We didn't have any atomic bombs. We had only built two, and we'd just blown up both of those. We didn't have any atomic bombs, but they thought we did, and that was enough for them to surrender. So perception is reality in a negotiation. It doesn't really matter whether you have the options. It's if you can convince the other side that you have options, and if you can convince them that their options are limited. Let me give you another example of international negotiations where you can learn from that and apply it to day-to-day negotiations. That would be the hostages being held in Beirut during the George Bush administration era. Do you remember that? One of them was held for 6.5 years. Pérez de Cuéllar, the UN Secretary General who got them out, would tell you that we got them out because we knew how to downplay the importance of the bargaining chip. We were finally able to convince those hostage takers that they didn't hold a very good bargaining chip there, that we cared about these hostages, but on the other hand, we had told them not to be there. They took responsibility. So we didn't care enough to change our national policy about hostage taking. That's a very sensitive position to advance when people's lives are at stake. But you will recall that President Carter did exactly the opposite. When he had the hostages in the Tehran embassy problem, he made it the focal point of his administration. He came right out and said, nothing is more important to me than getting these hostages out. I'm not going to leave Washington until we do. That is about the worst thing you can do in a negotiation. Just about the worst thing, to let the other side know how much you care. Now, the hostage who was held longest in Beirut was Terry Anderson, the Associated Press bureau chief. He was held hostage for 6.5 years. He had a sister by the name of Peggy Say, and Peggy Say, financed by AP, waged a battle for 6.5 years that we would never forget, that her brother was being held hostage in Beirut. And everybody was saying, wasn't that wonderful? If you were being held hostage, wouldn't you love to have a sister like Peggy Say? Not me. I think it's very significant that he was the last prisoner released. I think she probably delayed his release by a couple of years doing what she did. They probably didn't know why Terry Anderson was so important to us. All they knew was that every time they opened up an American newspaper, here was his picture on the front page. So don't let the other side know how much you care, and you do much better in a negotiation. So the message here is that once you get the fundamentals down, which I'll start to teach you now, then from then on, every time you turn on the television or open up the newspaper, you'll be able to understand what they're doing, you'll know why they're doing it, and it becomes a continuing learning process for you. So with that in mind, now let's go to some basic negotiating tactics, or gambits, as I call them. Gambits is a chess term that means any maneuver for advantage. These are some beginning negotiating gambits, the things you do in the early stages to be sure you're setting it up for a successful conclusion. Now, I need to warn you up front that some of these are going to sound awfully ruthless to you. When you hear some of these, you're going to say, where on earth did they dig this guy up from? This is the kind of guy who would train homing pigeons and then move. And I wouldn't feel comfortable doing this kind of thing. What you need to understand is these things are being done to you all the time. And I think when you hear some of these things, you're going to say to yourself, aha, now I know what they did to me. Now I know why I paid more for that than I should have done. Now I know why I didn't get that increase in pay that I felt that I deserved. Now I know what they did to me. So we learn them for our own defense. So now let's go on to rule number 1 in negotiating. Never say yes to the first offer, however good it looks, because there is a predictable sequence of responses that will go through anybody's mind anytime you say okay to the first suggestion. So predictable that I'll have you tell me what they are. Fair enough. Let's say that you're thinking of buying a second car, and the people down the street have one for sale, and they're asking, let's just say, $10,000 for it. And at that, it is a terrific buy. There's not a thing wrong with the price. You can't wait to get down there and snap it up before somebody else beats you to it. But on the way down there, you start thinking to yourself, well, I'll be a good negotiator. Just to see what happens, I'll make them a super low offer on the car. I'll offer them $8,000 for the car. Now, I know I'm not going to get it for that, but maybe we'll end up splitting the difference. It'll be an even better buy. So you're going down. You sit down with the husband and wife that own the automobile. You present your $8,000 offer. You're waiting for them to explode with rage at such a low offer. What actually happens is the husband looks at the wife and says, well, what do you think, dear? And she says, oh, let's go ahead and sell it and get rid of it anyway. What is your first reaction? Are you sitting there thinking, wow, what a terrific negotiator I am? I could not have got it for a penny less. Is that what you're thinking? I don't think so. What are you thinking?
What's wrong with the car?
What's wrong with the car, right? And what about the price?
Left money on the table.
Left money on the table, right? Could have done better. Should have gone in lower. Let's take Jim's point first. Left money on the table. Could have done better. The interesting thing about that is it has absolutely nothing to do with the price. Nothing to do with the price at all. It only has to do with the way they reacted to the proposal. What if you'd have gone in at $7,000 or $6,000 or $5,000? And they said, oh, sure, we'll take that. Wouldn't you still think you could have done better, Jim?
Sure.
It has nothing to do with the price. It only has to do with the way they reacted to the proposal. About 8 years ago, I bought 100 acres of land up in the state of Washington. And they were asking $185,000 for the land. And I analyzed this thing and decided it would be a super buy if I could get it for $150,000. I asked the real estate agent to present an offer at $115,050. And I'll tell you in a minute how I came up with that figure. The first thing the real estate agent said was, Roger, $115,050? Where did this $50 come from? I've never had an offer like that before. And I said, well, I've just been buying land for so long now. I just have a formula that I used. I punched in the numbers, and that's the way it came up. What's the real reason? Specific numbers have credibility, right? People tend to believe specific numbers. In all of the tests that we have done, if a negotiator proposes a rounded number, it almost invites the other side to make a counterproposal. If they'll go in with a specific number like that, the other side is much less likely to try and get a better deal. Now, that's why Ivory soap is 99 and 44 100% pure. That's why Taster's Choice coffee is 99.7% caffeine-free. You look at a specific number like that, and you tend not to question it. Well, I went back to Los Angeles, where I live, leaving the real estate agent to present the offer to the seller. And frankly, I thought I'd be lucky if anything happened on this at all. They're asking 185. I'm offering 115. To my amazement, a few days later, I got the offer back in the mail, accepted exactly the way I had proposed it. Now, I know for a fact I got a terrific buy on the land. There's not a question in my mind about that. Within 3 years, I'd sold off 60 of the acres for more than I paid for the whole 100. So I'd paid off my entire investment, plus I'd set up something like a $100,000 trust deed. A couple of years later, I sold another 20 acres off for more than I paid for the whole 100. Last year, I sold the final 20 acres off for way more than I paid for the whole 100. So this has been like a cash cow over the years. It's been just a terrific investment for me. But to this day, 8 years later, what am I thinking? I could have done better. I should have gone in lower. Now, if I went back to Washington to buy more land from that buyer, as perhaps you do continuous business with other people, you deal with them over and over again. If I went back to Washington to buy more land from that buyer, would I be a tougher negotiator next time around? Oh, you better believe it, because I felt I left money on the table the last time we did business. So the first reaction people are going to have is, I could have done better. The second reaction is what Bob said. Something's got to be wrong here. Something's going on that I don't understand if they're willing to say yes to an offer that I didn't think they would. My next thought on that land was, wow, am I going to take a good look at that preliminary title report when it comes in, because something's going on here that I don't understand if they're willing to say yes to an offer that I didn't think they would. These same two thoughts will go through anybody's mind anytime you say, okay, to the first suggestion. If your son came to you and said, could I borrow the car tonight? And you said, you bet, son, take it, have a wonderful time. Wouldn't he automatically think, I could have done better. I could have got $10 for the movie out of this thing. Wouldn't he automatically think, hey, what's going on here? How come they want me out of the house? What's going on that I don't understand? This is a very simple principle to talk about. It's very easy to understand. It is very hard to do when you're in the thick of a negotiation and the proposal from the other side is much better than you thought it was going to be. And you're so relieved that it wasn't worse, you make the mistake of saying yes too quickly, automatically triggering those two thoughts in their mind. Well, what does this teach us? This teaches us that we always go through the process of negotiating. Even if the first offer is perfectly acceptable to you, even if that's what you'll end up doing, we go through the process of negotiating because we want the other side to feel that they won in the negotiation. Far more important that they feel that they won than that you feel that you'd won. In fact, I would almost give you that as a definition of a power negotiator. Two of you may go out to negotiate something. You're in exactly the same circumstances. You both come away with exactly the same numbers. But the power negotiator comes away with the other side feeling that they won The poor negotiator comes away with the other side feeling that they lost. So never say yes to the first offer. If you'll remember this, it'll solve an awful lot of problems for you. It solves the attorney problem, for one thing. Did you think you all thought you had something put together until they took it to their attorney? You all love attorneys, right? Did you hear about the attorney who died and went to heaven? That's not the punchline, George. St. Peter said, wow, we're thrilled to have you up here. We've never had a 125-year-old attorney up here before. He says, I'm not 125, I'm 39. St. Peter said, well, there must be some confusion. According to the hours that you've billed. But see, they're going to take your proposal to their attorney or their vice president or the committee, whatever higher authority they've set up. They're going to take it to them with one or two attitudes. If they thought they won at the negotiating table, they're going to take it to them and say, hey, I think we worked out a terrific deal here. Do you see any problems with this? If they're not sure that they won, they'll take it to them and say, well, look, here's a proposal we got. What do you think of this? Which one invites that attorney to create problems for you, whether it's needed or not? So rule number one is never jump at the first offer. Now, I thought that was a 100% rule until a fellow called me from Los Angeles, and he said, Roger, I was driving down Hollywood Boulevard last night listening to your cassette tapes in my car. I stopped at a gas station to use the restroom. As I came back out to my car, somebody stuck a gun in my ribs and said, okay, buddy, give me your wallet. He said, well, I'd just been listening to your tapes. So I said, look, here's what I'm prepared to do. He said, I'll give you the cash, but let me keep the wallet and the credit cards. Fair enough. And the guy said, buddy, you didn't listen to me, did you? Give me the wallet. Yes, sir. So that's my disclaimer. In this litigious age, that's my disclaimer. Sometimes you don't negotiate, but it's almost a 100% rule. Don't say yes to the first offer, however good it looks. Rule number two, ask for more than you expect to get in the negotiating process. Henry Kissinger went so far as to say that effectiveness at the bargaining table depends on your ability to overstate your initial demands. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? That's one of the top international negotiators saying, hey, I'll tell you right now, if you're going to negotiate with me, I'm going to ask for more than I expect to get. But I'm going to do it in such a way that it is still a very effective negotiating technique, even if you know what I'm doing. When I do the all-day and the two-day seminars, we create workshops and we do some negotiating together. We might establish a business that's for sale, so we have buyers and sellers. And at the end, we get all the results in and we post them up on the screen to see which seller got the highest price and which buyer got the lowest price. And having established that, we ask them what their opening position was. What did they start out? And you know what happens? 19 out of 20 times, whatever the size of the group, wherever we do this, 19 out of 20 times, the side that started with the highest price as sellers got the highest price. 19 out of 20 times, the buyer who started with the lowest price got the lowest price. It's probably the most consistent negotiating theory that I can tell you about. It's the one that always applies. If you thought back through all the negotiations you've ever done in your lifetime, there's a very good chance that the more you ask for, the more you got. So now I want to ask you, I want you to give me some reasons why you should ask for more than you expect to get. If you're negotiating a new compensation package, why would it be a good idea to ask for more than you expect to get? If you're buying a piece of real estate, why would it be a good idea to make a low opening offer? Give me some reasons.
You might get it.
You might just get it. Well, I'm glad to see some positive thinking to start with. Right. You might just get it. And the only way you're going to find out is to ask. You just don't know how the universe is aligned on that particular day. Your patron saint may be leaning over a cloud, looking down at you and saying, wow, they've been working so hard for so long now, let's just give them a break. So that's a good place to start. You might just get it. Give me another reason. Michael.
Also establish the environment for the other side feeling some degree of success when there is a movement from your position.
That's right. It creates an environment where there's some degree of success in their mind. In other words, it creates an environment where they can win. Okay? That's the number one reason why how negotiators say ask for more than you expect to get. It creates a climate where the other person can have a win with you in the negotiation. If you go in with your very best price up front, there's no way that they can negotiate with you and have a win. And inexperienced negotiators always want to do this. This is the salesperson who's going out on a big sales call and they're saying to their sales manager, look, I know this is going to be competitive. I know they're getting bids from people all over town. Let me cut the price before we even start. Otherwise, we won't stand a chance of getting it. Experienced negotiators know the power of asking for more than you expect to get. Let them have a win with you in the negotiation. A while back, my oldest son came to me and he said, Dad, could I borrow your Corvette tonight? I said, well, wait a minute, right? I want to be accommodating, but that's a pretty fast car. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with you driving around in the Corvette all night. And he looked really disappointed and he said, well, could I borrow the minivan then? I said, oh, sure, you can borrow the minivan. That's not a problem at all. And I didn't think anything of it until half an hour later. I looked down in the driveway, and he plays bass guitar with this group. He's loading these huge loudspeakers into the back of the minivan. He had absolutely no intention of borrowing the Corvette. He just knew, ask for more than you expect to get. Then you're bound to get what you really want, but the other person feels they had a win with you in the negotiations. So that's good, Michael. Give me another reason for asking for more than you expect to get. Jack.
The other side may be very willing to give up a lot.
They may be willing to give up a lot. You just don't know what their position is. And the rule here is that the less you know about the other side, the more you ask for two reasons. Number one, you may be just misinformed about their situation. It's kind of like being in a store down in Mexico and there's this statue and you really don't know whether it's a $200 statue or a $500 statue. So you might want to make a super low offer. You offer them $50, $75, just to see what their reaction is because you may be totally misinformed. The other reason for asking for more, if you don't know much about the other side, is with a stranger you need to build rapport quickly. And the fastest way to be able to build rapport is to be able to make concessions to the other side. So that's a good reason. Give me another reason for asking for more than you expect to get.
So you can get what you want.
Then you can really get what you want. You stand a much better chance of getting it, right? Here's another reason. It raises the perceived value of your product or service. You see, very often their perception of your value initially is what you ask for it. It's what you price it at. If you say, well, we normally charge this, but for you we'll do it for this, you've immediately discounted the perceived value. So leave that full price up in writing if you possibly can, because people believe more what they see in writing than they do when they just hear it. Leave it up in writing. Let it sink in as the true value of the product or service. And if you do have to make any concessions, make them very reluctantly, make the other side work for them. I want to give you another reason for asking for more than you expect to get. And that is that if you are dealing with an egotistical person, and all I really mean by that is someone who's proud of their ability to negotiate. They think they're good negotiators, so they're going to negotiate well with you. If you're dealing with someone like that and you don't give them room to have a win in the negotiations will deadlock on you. Take a look at the Persian Gulf War. What were we asking Saddam Hussein to do? Maybe asking is not the right word, but what were we asking Saddam Hussein to do? You remember the Persian Gulf War? It was on CNN?
Get out of town.
Get out of town, right? Pull out of Kuwait. Well, actually, there were three things that George Bush, in his State of the Union address, with a beautiful piece of alliteration, probably written by Peggy Noonan, he said, I'm not bragging, I'm not bluffing, and I'm not bullying, but there's three things this man's got to do. He's got to pull out of Kuwait, he's got to restore the legitimate government of Kuwait, don't do what the Soviets did in Afghanistan and put a puppet government in, and he's got to make reparations for the damages that he did. So those were the three things we were saying he had to do. Now here's the problem. What was our bottom line? What was the least we were prepared to settle for? The same three things. No wonder it deadlocked. It had to deadlock. We didn't give Saddam Hussein room to have a win in the negotiations. If we'd have said to Saddam Hussein, okay, we want you and all your cronies exiled, we want a non-Arab neutral government installed in Baghdad, we want UN supervision of the removal of all military capability, plus those three things, then we could have given Saddam Hussein a win in the negotiations and still got what we wanted. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, Roger, Saddam Hussein was not on my Christmas card list this year. Not the kind of person I want to give a win to. Well, I agree with you on that, but see, when you're dealing with an egotistical person like that, if you don't give them room to have a win in the negotiations will deadlock on you. From that scenario in the Persian Gulf, you could draw one of two conclusions. Here's possibility number one. This is probably what Ross Perot would tell you. Our State Department negotiators are complete blithering idiots. This is possibility number one, right? What's possibility number two? We had absolutely no intention of settling for just those three things. We couldn't. General Schwarzkopf in his book, It Doesn't Take a Hero, said the minute we got down there, we understood that anything less than a military victory was a defeat for the United States. We couldn't let this man pull 600,000 troops back across the border, have him sitting there wondering when he might do it again. We had to have a reason to go in and militarily defeat him. So there's a negotiation where we wanted to create a deadlock because it served our purpose. What I'm concerned about is in your negotiations, you are inadvertently creating deadlocks because you don't have the courage to ask for more than you expect to get and then reluctantly back off of that position. Now, the next question would be, if we're going to ask for more than we expect to get, how much more than we expect to get should we ask for? This is called bracketing. Now, bracketing says that your initial proposal should be an equal distance on the other side of your objective as their initial proposal. Now, let me put some numbers to that. It'll make more sense to you. Car dealer is asking $15,000 for the car. You want to buy it for $13,000, you should make them an opening offer of $11,000. That sounds awfully low, doesn't it? They're at 15, we're going to start at 11, but it positions your objective midway between the two opening negotiating positions. Now, of course, it's not always true that you will end up at the midpoint. But wow, is that a good assumption to make? If you don't have anything else to go on, assume that you will end up midway between the two opening negotiating positions. And I think if you'll track that, you will be astounded at how often that happens. In little things and in big things too. Little things. One of your children comes to you and they want $20 for some project they're working on. And you say, no way am I going to give you $20 for that. I tell you what, I'll give you $10, not a penny more. Now we've established a negotiating range, right? They're asking for 20, we're offering 10. See how often you end up giving them $15. So often we end up in the middle. In big things, in 1982, we were negotiating the pay down of a loan with the government of Mexico. They were about to default on an $82 billion loan. Now, we resolved most of it by having them contribute their government-owned petroleum. It's a nationalized industry down there. Their government-owned petroleum to our strategic petroleum reserves. But it didn't take care of it all. So we asked them to pay us a $100 million negotiating fee. Well, when President Portillo heard about this, he went absolutely ballistic. He said, wait a minute, you're asking us to pay you a $100 million negotiating fee? No way. No way we're going to do that. You tell Ronald Reagan to drop that. We're not paying $100 million. In fact, we're not paying anything, nothing, nada. So now we've established a negotiating range, right? We're asking for $100 million. They're saying nothing. Guess what they ended up paying us? $50 million. So many times in little things and in big things too, you end up in the middle. So power negotiators know how to structure the negotiations so that if that happens, you get what you want. That's why on that land in Washington, I offered them $115,000. Remember the numbers? They're asking $185,000. I want to buy it for $150,000, so I mathematically compute. Wow, I got to start at $115,000 to make this thing work. I don't know if I've got the nerve to go in that low, but let's try it and see what happens because that's the rule. Well, now it blew me away when the seller accepted the first offer. But had we have ended up negotiating and ended up in the middle, I still would have got what I wanted. Where you get into trouble is you don't have the courage to go in that low, so you start maybe at $140,000 and the seller's at $185,000, you're trying to get to $150,000. That's hard to do. You're only prepared to make $10,000 in concessions. You're expecting then to make $35,000 in concessions. That's hard to do. Or worse yet, you feel uncomfortable about negotiating, so you say, well, I'll just offer them what I'm willing to pay, and they either take it or they don't. So I'll offer them $115,000. That is virtually impossible to do. To get the seller to keep on coming down to you, make concessions to you, 185,000, 180, 175,000, 170. You want them to keep on coming down to you, and you're not prepared to make any concessions to them at all. That is virtually impossible to get the seller to do that, even if the $150,000 is the perfectly fair price, even if that's what will make sense, even if that's the right thing for them to do. It's virtually impossible to get them to do that. So position yourself in the middle, and it makes it a lot easier for you. Now, bracketing presupposes a very important thing, and that is that you got the other side to commit to a position first. You see, if you can get them to commit to a position, then you can bracket your objective so that if you end up in the middle, you get what you want. If they can get you to commit to a position first, all they have to do is bracket their objective in the negotiation. So if you end up in the middle, as so often happens, they get what they want. The worst negotiating position for you to be in, the worst, is to have somebody else saying to you, well, you just give us your very best proposal and we'll tell you whether we'll take it or not. That is absolutely the worst position. That is them saying to you, I want you to make a commitment to me, but I'm not prepared to make any kind of commitment to you at all. That is the worst negotiating position you can be in. Now, it is a wonderful negotiating position for them to be in. A wonderful negotiating position for them to be in. It's the worst negotiating position for you to be in. So get away from that. Don't be making commitments to people who haven't made a commitment to you. If they say to you, well, I know you've advertised the car for this much, but I know you'll give a better price than that. What's your very best price? You should say, well, as far as I know, this is the very best price we can give you. But I tell you what, if you'll make a proposal to me, I'll take it to my people. You should never give yourself the authority to make a decision in the negotiations. You always have a vague higher authority out there that you have to check with. I will take it to my people, and I'll see what I can do for you with them. That's good guy, bad guy, like the old police movies. But don't be making proposals to people unless they have made a commitment to you. So the worst negotiating position for you to be in is for them to be saying to you, you just make a proposal to us and we'll tell you whether we'll accept it or not. So bracketing tells you that you should get the other person to commit and then position your objective midway between the two opening negotiating positions. Now let's talk about flinching. Flinching is probably, when you first hear about it, it's kind of the silliest thing that I teach about negotiating. But it's also the one that I get more feedback from people on. I'll have people call my office or they'll send me a postcard and say, I flinched and this is what happened. A woman told me that she went to dinner in one of the finest restaurants in Boston, and when the wine waiter showed her the wine list, she flinched, and the wine waiter immediately took $5 off the bottle of wine. A fellow who was buying a car said, I flinched with the car salesperson. They immediately came down $2,000 on the price. Flinching is simply the visual reaction to the other side's proposal. Whatever their proposal is, you gasp in shock and surprise at their audacity in asking that much. Typically, a concession will follow a flinch. So let's say that you're at a resort area, and he's one of these charcoal sketch artists doing the sketch, doesn't have the price posted, has the shield sitting on the stool. And you say, how much is the sketch? He says, $15. If that doesn't appear to shock you, his next words will be, and $5 extra for color. If you still don't appear to be shocked, you'll say, and we have these shipping cartons here, you'll need one of these too. As opposed to with a flinch, how much is the sketch? $15. $15! That's a lot of money. He says, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I normally charge $5 extra for the color. For you, I'll throw it in at no extra charge. That's still a lot of money, you say. He says, well, come here. I have never, ever done this before. But you are such a nice person, I'll not only throw in the color, I'll give you one of these shipping cartons too. See the difference? Now, do any of you know somebody who would never do anything like that because it's just too theatrical for them? The kind of person who would walk into a store and say, how much is the coat in the window? $2,000. That's not bad, they say. They should be having a heart attack in the background. Now, look, I know it sounds dumb, And I know it sounds ridiculous, and I know you're thinking, come on, Roger, I'm not going to make a fool of myself doing dumb stuff like that. But see, the truth of the matter is, the other side may have thrown something out on the negotiating table that they don't expect you for a moment to go along with. It's just something they threw out on the negotiating table to see what your response would be. And if you don't appear to be too shocked or surprised, all of a sudden they start thinking, well, maybe we will get them to do that. I didn't think they would, but they don't seem to be too shocked. Let's hang in. Let's be tough negotiators. Let's see if we can't get them to do that. When I do the all-day and the two-day seminars, as I told you, we break up into groups and we do some negotiating. So we have buyers and we have sellers and we have referees. Now, the referees are in a very interesting position because they have been in on the planning sessions of both the buyers and the sellers. They know what each side's negotiating range is. They know what the buyers are going to start at. They know what they're willing to go to. They know what the sellers are going to ask. They know what they're willing to come down to. So they might see the buyers make a proposal to the sellers that they know the buyers think is absolutely outrageous. They have barely got the nerve to propose this. They think they're going to get laughed out of the room the minute they do. But to their surprise, they make the proposal to the sellers, and the sellers don't appear to be too shocked. They thought the sellers were going to say, wait a minute, you want us to do what? You got to be out of your mind. We're not going to do that. But to their surprise, the response of the sellers was much more measured. The sellers are saying, well, no, I don't think we'd be prepared to go that low. And in an instant, the negotiation changes. You can see the change in the buyer's face. What a moment ago was an outrageous proposal to these buyers now becomes doable. Now they're thinking, well, I don't know, maybe we're not as power pot as we thought we were. Let's hang in, let's be tough negotiators. So what we need to have you do before you go out into a negotiation is get you in front of the mirror, practicing your flinches, because people are watching for your reaction. Now, the people who study this kind of thing, the body language experts, will tell you that a huge amount of what you're communicating is not what you're saying at all. A lot of it has to do with the way that you're saying it, the emphasis you put on the words. Over half of it has nothing to do with what you're saying or the way that you're saying it. It's what they're looking at that particular point in time. Now, I'm sure you've all had a little neurolinguistic training, right? You know that people are either visual, they tend to believe what they see, or auditory, they're more inclined to believe what they hear, or kinesthetic, they believe what they feel. Now, there are some gustatory and olfactory taste and smell people out there, but not very many of them, and they're perfume testers and chefs. You're not going to run into them in ordinary life. So basically, we're down to these three: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. If you'd like to know which you are, I can teach you in 10 seconds. Close your eyes. George, you're not closing your eyes. Is this because you've had a problem with an Englishman in the past? That's why they say the sun never sets on the British Empire, that even God wouldn't trust an Englishman in the dark. Close your eyes. I want you to think of the house in which you lived when you were 10 years old. Okay, go ahead and open your eyes. Now, some of you, when you thought about the house, you just saw the house in your mind. You got a visual picture of it. These would be the visuals. Raise your hand if you're a visual. Okay, a very high percentage. Some of you didn't so much see, but you heard things going on. Trains going by, children playing, waves crashing on the beach, whatever that might be. Auditories. Okay, we have a couple of auditories. That's typically the lowest percentage, but auditories tend to be very auditory. I have a friend in Santa Fe, New Mexico, who's a psychotherapist. He's very auditory. He can remember every conversation he's ever had with a patient. But if he meets him in the supermarket, he doesn't recognize him. Now, the minute they say, "Good morning, doctor," he says, "Oh, yes, that's the bipolar personality with antisocial tendencies." He triggers in on what he hears, not what he sees. Now, some of you didn't so much see or hear, but you just got a feeling for what it was like when you were 10 years old. This would be the kinesthetic people. Okay, we've just a couple of two or three kinesthetics. Oh, wait a minute, we didn't get everybody. There must be another group in the room. Here's the other group. How many of you, when asked a question by a speaker, never ever raise your hands? May I see your hands, please? Well, that's a very high percentage of visuals, but you can count on 70% of people being visual. Assume people are visual unless you have something else to go on Assume that they're visual, and what they're seeing is more important than what they're hearing. That's the importance of flinching in a negotiation. Now, we're going to come back in a minute and we'll do some more negotiating gambits together. But first of all, I want to talk a little bit about what makes you a good negotiator. You know, an expression I hear an awful lot of is, oh, he's a born negotiator, or she's a born negotiator. Now, that couldn't be true. I mean, read the birth announcements in the local newspaper. You will never see a birth announcement that says, at St. Bartholomew's yesterday, a negotiator was born. No, it's a learned skill just like everything else. Now, these are the things that make you a good negotiator. Number one, the understanding that there is always pressure on the other side just as much as there is on you. But it never appears to be that way. Whichever side of the negotiating table you are on, you will always think you have the weaker hand. That's just the way things are set up on this third rock from the sun. If I'd been setting it up, I might have set it up differently, but it's just the way things are. Why is it this way? Because you know all about the pressure that's on you. You don't know about the pressure that's on the other side. But it's there. Something brought them to the negotiating table. There's some reason why they're sitting there talking to you. If they could get a better deal from somebody else, why haven't they done that already? And the minute you understand that and work with it, you become a more powerful negotiator. It's kind of like walking into a bank and you're there for a personal loan, and you get into this bank and you get intimidated by these glamorous surroundings, and you start thinking to yourself, oh, why would a big bank like this want to lend little old me money? And you lose sight of the fact completely there's tremendous pressure on that bank to get those deposits out in the form of loans. So you learn to mentally compensate for that. You learn to walk up to that loan officer thinking, wow, I bet this loan officer just got a royal chewing out from their boss who said, if you can't find somebody to lend money to around here today, we don't even need you anymore. You learn to mentally compensate for that. A classic example is an employee asking their boss for a raise in pay. And it may have taken them weeks, maybe months, to pluck up the courage to go in and sit down and open up the negotiation in the first place. And the minute they get in there, they start thinking, oh, I hope this doesn't upset them. They've been so good to me. I hope it doesn't spoil my career path here. And you know what? The boss is probably sitting on the other side of the desk thinking, oh, I hope we don't lose them over this. They're so good, they would never, ever find a replacement. Remember what I told you earlier about options give you power? If you can project that you have lots of options, at the same time you can limit the other side's perception of their options, then you have power in the negotiation. I think that every employee should have one part of their job that they do so well that their boss would have a terrible time replacing them, finding someone who could do that little part of their job that well. It doesn't have to be everything they do, but if there's some little thing they do so well that the boss would not know where to find a replacement for that particular part of the job, that gives the employee a lot of power in dealing with the boss because it limits the boss's perception of the options that they have. So the first thing that makes you a good negotiator is understanding that there is always pressure on the other side just as much as there is on you. The second thing that makes you a good negotiator is understanding that negotiating is played by a set of rules, just like the game of chess. The responses are very predictable from the other side. Now, some of these gambits, when I talk to you about them, you're probably thinking, well, that sounds pretty blue sky to me. Sounds like a fun thing to talk about in a seminar, but you don't understand our industry. That would be tough to do out there in the real world. I just want you to buy some blue sky from me until you get a chance to get out there and try some of these things and see how predictable the response of the other side is. I always remember doing a seminar for a large savings and loan in Southern California. And we had an afternoon seminar, then we broke for a cocktail party, and then they had dinner for all the employees in the hotel. So we're after the seminar, and I'm in the cocktail party with the president of the savings and loan. The maitre d' from the hotel comes up. He's got 2 bottles of wine in his arms, and he wants to know if they should serve wine with the dinner. Well, one of the things I had taught in the seminar is what I call the vice technique, that regardless of what the proposal is from the other side, you simply look at them and you say, you'll have to do better than that. So the maitre d' asked the president if she would serve wine with the dinner. The president said, well, how much is it? And the maitre d' said, well, it's $22.50 a bottle. And the president was just about to say, oh, that'd be fine, when I said, no, 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 you'll have to do better than that. And the maitre d' looked a little startled, and the president looked uncomfortable. And the maitre d' finally said, well, I tell you what, if you'll serve it for everybody, I'll let you have it for $15 a bottle. The president's face lit up. He was delighted. He was about to say, hey, that's great, when I said, no, no, no. We were thinking more like $10 a bottle. And the maitre d' now got really irritated. He said, look, I am not going to negotiate the price of wine with you. $13.50 is absolutely the best I can do. Now, the president had been in the seminar. He had heard me talk about the Weiss technique. But I don't think until he actually saw it in action that he really believed how effective it could be. Why are these gambits so effective? It's not because I'm such a genius. It's simply because over the years and years that I have been teaching this, we've had so much feedback from people. And this happened to me, this happened to me, this is what happened, that we know predictably what the response will be. Now, not every single time, but enough of the time to make it a very good response. There's a law of predictability that comes into play here. I want to do a little workshop exercise with you on the law of predictability. I want you all to think of a number between 1 and 10. Okay, multiply that number by 9. Anybody need a calculator? Add the two digits together. Take away 5. Now you're all thinking of a number, right? Translate that number into a letter of the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay? Now think of a country that starts with that letter. Take the second letter of that country and think of an animal that starts with that letter. Now, raise your hand if you're thinking of an elephant in Denmark. Look around the room. What a high percentage. Now, in a group of this size, we will also have 2 people who are thinking of an elk in Denmark. Where are you? Nobody thinking of an elk. Maybe somebody thinking of an emu, which is actually a bird. Okay. And we'll have 1 person totally confused on the math and nowhere even close. Where are you? Okay. Now, why does that work that way? It's just the law of predictability. I know if I say to you, think of a piece of furniture, 70% of you are thinking chair. I know that if I say to you, think of a flower that grows in the garden, 80% of you are thinking rose. If I ask you what color the rose is, what are most of you thinking? Red, right? 90% of you are thinking red. It's the law of predictability. That's why these negotiating gambits work so effectively. It's simply we've had so much feedback over the years, we know what the predictable response of the other side is going to be. So the second thing that makes you a power negotiator is understanding that the game of negotiating is played by a set of rules just like the game of chess. The third thing that makes you a good negotiator is getting past your embarrassment or discomfort with negotiating. You need to realize that in this country, it's not part of our culture. It's simply not part of our culture to negotiate things. The only time we feel it's appropriate to negotiate is when we're selling or buying a car, or when we're selling or buying real estate, and we do that so little we get very little practice at it. So we've got to realize that. Around the rest of the world, when they look at a price tag, they do not think it's the lowest price the merchant will take for the item. They think it's the highest price the merchant will take for the item. And the real price is somewhere below that, but that's not part of our culture. So we need to get past that and get over our discomfort with negotiating. I remember doing an executive retreat for a large publishing company in New York. They had rented a huge mansion out on Long Island for this seminar, and they were there for the whole week, but I was doing a one-day seminar for them. The night before my seminar, the electricity went out in the area, and there was no electricity when we woke up the next morning. So the next morning, instead of getting wake-up calls, they were knocking on our doors and handing us candelabras, kind of fit the old environment of this house. There wasn't any hot water to shower with, and there wasn't any cooked breakfast for us, but they did a nice bread with a cold breakfast. So we started the seminar. Fortunately, we were in the ballroom. There were windows all around it, so there was plenty of light. I normally use an overhead projector and a microphone, but we couldn't do that because we didn't have any electricity. But by now, everybody's kind of having fun with this unique environment that we're in. We're about 2 hours into the seminar when I said to the president of the company, who was sitting about where you are, Jim, I said, okay, let's practice what we've learned so far. I want you to go to these people and see how much they will take off the bill because there is no electricity. Guess what he said to me? He said, Roger, wait a minute. It's not their fault there's no electricity. It's off in the entire area. See, reluctant to negotiate because it's not part of our culture. But by now, he had some peer group pressure working on him. He had all his executives saying, oh, come on, go see what you can do. So I gave him his instructions. I said, okay, first of all, I want you to find the person who could make the concession to you. It doesn't make any sense to negotiate with someone who can only say no to you. Watch that with bankers. Bankers love titles. You can be talking to a vice president of a bank. They only have the authority to say no to you. They do not have the authority to say yes to you. So find the person who could make the concession to you. Then I don't want you to be confrontational. I don't want you to say, I'm really upset about this. Makes the other people fight back. I want you to say, look, I've got a lot of unhappy people in the room there, and we just want to know how much you're going to adjust the bill by because there's no electricity. And whatever that person says to you, I told him, just say, I'm sorry, you'll have to do better than that. Well, off he went to the chairs of his executives, and he came back about 45 minutes later, and he's standing in the back of the room, and he had a kind of sheepish look on his face, and I thought, oh, no, he blew it. It's not going to be a good example for the group. But I had him come up to the front of the room and tell the story anyway. He said, Roger, the problem was I couldn't say you'll have to do better than this. I found the person who could make the concession to me. I told him, I got a lot of unhappy people in the room, and we want to know how much you're going to adjust the bill by. And he thought about it for a while, and he said, well, I tell you what, I won't charge you for the rooms last night. The executive was just astonished. He said, I was standing there. He had just made a concession to me of several $1,000s. I was just totally stunned at what had happened. So I stood there. I didn't know what to do. And he finally said, well, all right, I won't charge you for the dinner last night either. He said, now I am totally astonished. I'm standing there. My mouth is hanging open. I don't know what to say. And he finally said to me, wow, are you a good negotiator? He said, I tell you what, I won't charge you for the cocktail party either. He sent me a copy of the adjusted bill afterwards. They had adjusted that bill by $7,400 over something that he never would have gone to negotiate if he hadn't have been pushed into it by his peer group. So we got to get past that difficulty we have with negotiating. For the next 60 days, we've got to just negotiate everything we do. If you go into a store and you're buying a newspaper, see if you can get a nickel taken off because the corner's turned. It's not the nickel. It's getting past that fear and embarrassment that we have. The fourth thing that makes you a good negotiator is learning to concentrate on the issues in a negotiation. Have you ever watched tennis on television and seen a highly emotional star like an Ely Nastasia or John McEnroe jumping up and down at the other end of the court and thought to yourself, how on earth could anybody play tennis against somebody like that? It's such a game of concentration, it doesn't seem fair. Well, the answer to that is that good tennis players know only one thing affects the outcome of the game of tennis. Only one thing, and that's the movement of the ball across the net. What the other tennis player is doing doesn't affect the outcome of the game at all, as long as you know what the ball is going to do. So you learn to concentrate on the ball. Now, when you're negotiating with people, the only thing that affects the outcome of the negotiations is the movement of the goal concessions across the negotiating table. It's the only thing that affects the outcome. But it is so easy to get thrown off by the other side, isn't it? They pull a tactic on us that we don't think is fair. They back down on what we felt was a commitment, and all of a sudden we are so upset with the other person that we're not focusing on the issues anymore. And power negotiators don't do that. It's inconceivable that the president could be walking through the White House, do a big double take, and aren't you our chief arms negotiator? Aren't you supposed to be in Geneva talking to the Russians? What are you doing here? Well, yes, Mr. President, I know that's where you sent me, but boy, you can't do business with those Russians. You can't trust them. They're always backing down on their commitments. I just got so upset I walked out of there. Of course they don't do that. The only time they'll walk out or show any irritation at all is as a planned negotiating tactic. Other than that, they concentrate on the issues. Where are we now compared to where we were 5 minutes ago, yesterday, or last week? It is okay to get upset with people in a negotiation. It's perfectly all right as long as you're in control and you're doing it as a planned negotiating tactic. You know when you always lose in a negotiation? It's when you get upset and you're out of control. You will always lose in a negotiation. So concentrate on the issues. The only thing that matters is the movement of the goal concessions across the negotiating table. This explains why, incidentally, a salesperson can lose a good account. And they package up the file and they take it into their sales manager and they say, well, we lost that one. Don't waste any time trying to save it. If anybody could have saved it, I could have saved it because I've been working with these people for years. And the sales manager says, wait a minute, I don't want to lose this account. I'll make an appointment. I want to talk to these people. I want to see if we can hold this thing together. No, you'd be wasting your time. But the sales manager can hold it together. He can meet with the people and hold the thing together. Why? It's not because he's any sharper or brighter than the salesperson. What's the big difference then? He's not emotionally involved with the clients the way the salesperson has become. So learn to concentrate on the issues. Now, the fifth thing that makes you a powerful negotiator is understanding that the word no is not a refusal to a negotiator. It is an opening negotiating position. That is all that it is. And the next time you walk in to see a customer and that person says, oh, no, not you again. Look, how many times do I have to tell you we're not going to do any business with you? You're wasting my time. Quit wasting my time. Get out of my office. This is not a refusal. I know it's close, but it is not a refusal to a negotiator. It is simply an opening negotiating position. Learn from your children on this one. You can say to your child, look, I'm sick of hearing about this. I don't want to hear another word about it. You go to bed. I don't want to see you until the morning. If you ever bring this up again, you are grounded for a month. Do they hear refusal? No. They start thinking, wow, that's an interesting opening negotiating position. Where are we going to go from there? So those are the 5 things that make you a more powerful negotiator. Now let's come back and talk about some negotiating gambits. Reluctant buyer, reluctant seller. If you approached a seller with enthusiasm, you know, they've got a car for sale and you go there and you love it and you take a test drive and say, wow, isn't it wonderful? Is that going to get you the very best price? I don't think so, but I see that so often. I'll see people go into a car lot and get so excited about a particular make and model of car. They'll pick out the colors, the upholstery, the options. They might even say to the salesperson, well, my car broke down today. I need something to get to work in tomorrow. Then they expect to negotiate a good price. It simply doesn't work like that. You always play the reluctant buyer role. You might take that car out for a long test drive. You ask all the questions you can think of. Finally, when you cannot think of another thing to say, you say, wow, I really appreciate all the time you've taken with me on this. You've obviously spent a lot of time with me, and I appreciate that. But, you know, unfortunately, this is just not the way we want to go. But I sure appreciate all the time you've taken with me. I wish you the best of luck. You see their look of expectation go from here to here. You start to leave. At the very last minute, almost as an afterthought, you turn back and you say, you know, I really do want to be fair to you because you spent so much time with me. Just to be fair to you, what is the very lowest price you would take for the car? This is remarkably effective in squeezing the negotiating range before the negotiations even start. Would you agree with me in a situation like that, the first number they throw at you is probably not the best you can do? This is a reasonable assumption. I call the first number the wish number. This is what they are wishing you would do. Somewhere out there, there's a walkaway number. There's a price at which they will not or cannot sell. Now, we don't know what the walkaway number is. We've got to spend some time doing some negotiating things, seeing if we can figure out what the walkaway number is. Now, when you play reluctant buyer, they're not going to come all the way down from the wish price down to the walkaway price. But here's what will typically happen. They will give away half their negotiating range. Just because you did that, they'll give away half of their negotiating range. Gives you a pretty good feel for how far you may be able to get them to go if you keep on negotiating. So always play the reluctant buyer role. But on the other hand, look out for the reluctant seller. Donald Trump sold the St. Moritz Hotel in New York to Alan Bond, the Australian billionaire, when he was doing well. He had bought this hotel from the Hemsleys 3 years before this for $79 million. He turned around and sold it to Bond for $160 million. Nice return on investment. And I can just imagine Bond trying to buy this hotel from Trump, and Trump saying, "Oh, Alan, not the St. Moritz. I didn't know you wanted to talk to me about the St. Moritz. That's my favorite property. I'm never going to sell that. I'm going to put that in trust for my grandchildren. Look, anything else I have is for sale. Make me an offer, but not the St. Moritz." But look, Alan, I do appreciate you coming all this way to make me an offer. So just to be fair to you, what is the very best price you would give me? Unless you realize what they're doing to you, you will go from the low point of your negotiating range to the midpoint of the negotiating range, maybe even the high point of your negotiating range before the negotiations even start. As I said, one of the things that makes you a more powerful negotiator is understanding that there is always pressure on the other side just as much as there is on you. So in this session, we have covered just some of the fundamental things that make you a more powerful negotiator. If you'll go out there and just try some of these things, I think you'll see how effective they can be. It'll put you well on the path to being a power negotiator. This is Roger Dawson. Good luck in all your negotiations. Thank you.